The LouieTeeNetwork is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to Training Camp Confidential, Training Camp with the Washington Commanders. Day 15. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Lots to get to tonight. DQ had a presser, so we're going to talk about that. We had a transaction today, and then we have actual practice to talk about. Day 15 of training camp. So we're going to get to all of that tonight. But we found out something today before practice even started that was taking place on Sunday night. The boys are getting spiffy on us. Isn't it ironic? We literally just talked about jerseys. I was a little bit late to the party on the whole jersey conversation, right? Like, it happened on the 9th. They released the jersey schedule on the 9th. I don't know how I missed that and how we didn't talk about it. I saw when it came out. I just felt like it was later. I thought I was on my trip when that information came out. That information came out way before my trip. So we just talked about jerseys yesterday, and look at what happened. Voila. We talked about the blacks yesterday, and boom, we get the alternatives or the alternates, excuse me, on Sunday night against the Patriots. I mean, nobody's playing. You know, they're going to look crispy in their black on blacks on the sidelines because nobody's playing in this game. Hell, most of those guys won't even dress. They'll be in civvies. So they won't even be able to wear the jerseys. You know, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Bobby Wagner, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Sam Cox, all those guys are going to be in civvies. None of those guys will be dressed in football attire. So it's funny that they're wearing it here, but it's our only home preseason game. So it makes sense that they would do that. They haven't had another chance, and we're on television. We're on TV, Mom, right? So we won't be on there very often, especially not Sunday night. So yeah, they're taking advantage of the one time that they're going to be on television in this particular spot on NBC this season, unless I see y'all talking about me. I got a story to tell. I'll save that for the podcast. We had some transactions today. Commanders signed safety Kendall Brooks and Chappelle Russell. So obviously you have to have two moves in conjunction with those signings to fit them onto the 90-man roster. So two guys had to be released. They released linebacker Keandre Jones and safety Ben Nickel. Now, I need you to make the connection, right? Look at the positions that they released, but more importantly, look at the positions they brought in. They brought in a safety and they brought in a linebacker. They released a safety and a linebacker. Now, think about it from this perspective. You only bring in guys like Keandre Jones and Ben Nickel, like theoretically, you could put them on the field. They can play, but these guys haven't been getting any run in the preseason. And furthermore, these are core special team type guys. They're not defensive guys. So in order to give your defense a chance to at least look somewhat competent, they needed to bring in some bodies that could take the field on Sunday night against the Patriots. But look at the two positions that they signed, right? They wanted more guys that could actually play on the field and help them in the game on Sunday against the Patriots to log snaps. You don't sign a safety to come on and help you in a matter of 4 days unless you're not playing a bunch of your Like, we know the safety position could have upwards of 6 guys make the roster. They're not going to play guys that they know are going to be here. Jeremy Reeves and, and Percy Butler and Quan Martin and Jeremy Chin, those guys aren't playing at all, right? Reeves is playing, excuse me. Reeves will play. But Defoe, Percy Butler, Quan Martin, Jeremy Chin, those guys aren't playing at all. So you're already down 4 safeties, right? If Reeves is making the team, and if Owens is making the team, not to mention you still have, this is why we're going to talk about these positions. You still have Dominique Hampton. We're going to talk about him a little bit later on in today's show because something significant happened again. This is not the first time, but it happened again at practice today with Dominique Hampton. So we'll talk about that here in a second. And then linebacker. You're not playing Louie. You might not even play Davis in this game. No Louie, no Davis, no Wagner. So you got holes to fill. You got to put some linebackers on the field, right? So this is why, and of course, with the injury to Jordan McGee, that doesn't help matters either. So you see why they did what they did, right? Let's talk about training camp day 15, and then we'll get to DQ's presser. Let's start with the defense, who had a phenomenal day today, or at least early on in practice. They were really good. The defense started off fast with back-to-back PBUs. Now, the first of which was a Jonathan Allen bat down at the line of scrimmage. The second play would have been a Daron Payne sack. He got immediate pressure on Jaden Daniels and would have sacked him. The play continued on, and the pass was broken up by, I want to say, one of the linebackers. But I think Bobby Wagner broke up the pass, but it would have been a sack. Daron was in there almost immediately after the snap. So the defense got off to a fast start. Also, in that fast start, Mike Sainristil almost jumped in front of an OZ intended screen and picked it off. That guy's instincts, he's giving me, Kendall Fuller type vibes in, that second season when he started to morph into the best nickel in football. He's already giving me those vibes. And you already knew how I felt about Mike Sainristil, so it's not like I'm surprised by anything he's doing. I saw this at Michigan. This guy's a dog, right? So the defense got off to a fast start. And speaking of which, I wanted to bring this up. I saw this on somebody's social media. Lionel Willingham's social media account on X. And he retweeted like some crazy stats that I want to bring up only because I think there may be some relevancy here. The two of the fastest get-offs in the preseason thus far have been Commanders in terms of edge rusher and defensive tackle. So the fastest get-off of any defensive tackle in the preseason thus far has been Norrell Pollard, the defensive tackle out of Virginia Tech, that I think Dan Quinn likes a lot. I know that you don't want to put too much stock into preseason, right? I'm aware. And I sometimes overrate where guys play when they come in the game, because DQ has really stuck steadfast. And it's almost to the point now where I think I believe him when he says, no, we're just mixing around parts to see what guys can and can't do. Want to put them in other situations. And like, at first I was like, yeah, because I've been lied to by coaches so many times. It's just, I understand coach speak. So I was like, yeah, whatever you got to tell yourself, to try to convince us that shit doesn't matter. Okay, cool. But I've seen this done very, very many times. And generally this is how it goes. But there has been no rhyme or reason to the shit. I mean, they moved Mason Brooks in with the second team. He damn near started the game against the Jets, and then was cut the next day. Like, some of the shit just doesn't make sense. They're moving guys around. And then you figure out things, right? They probably figured out Mason Brooks doesn't serve a purpose here. He doesn't play enough. He doesn't have enough positional flexibility, right? He doesn't have the ability to play multiple spots on the offensive line, whereas they moved Chris Paul outside and he proved his worth. Now they feel like they can do multiple things with him. Maybe the same thing could be said with Trent Scott, right? So Norwell Pollard had the quickest get off. Remember, I told you this dude is explosive and twitchy when we brought him in here as an undrafted rookie out of Virginia Tech as a UDFA. But you know Quinn likes someone undersized, right, on the defensive line. And above all else, he loves explosiveness and quickness. I'm not telling you Norwell Pollard is making the team. I'm just telling you he was in essentially with the first team defense this past week against the Dolphins, along with Fedarian Mathis. They were the first two defensive tackles in the game because there was no Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen and Johnny Newton. So I'm just telling you what it was. And then the second fastest get off of an edge rusher in the preseason thus far is our own Jamin Davis. He's twitchy, man. Those two are twitchy. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Anyway, back to practice. Dyami Brown continues to shine. He had several catches from both JD5 and Jeff Driscoll, who took QB2 snaps because Marcus Mariota was out of practice completely today. Sam Hartman was back on an individual drill level. And then, they had some of the other quarterbacks that they have brought in here recently practicing as well, including Trace McSorley. But Dyami's best catch came on an underthrown deep ball from Jeff Driscoll that he came back and snagged. Dyami Brown's it's almost amazing to see the transformation that's happened with Dyami Brown. Shout out to Mr. Pink, because I know he's out there right now. Mr. Pink literally asked me on X, not even 10 minutes ago, we talked about this. Maybe more like 2 hours ago. So he saw, some tweet from the 33rd team, which was frivolous because they had CeeDee Lamb's odds of being traded and where his next destination would be, essentially his trade destination odds. And the Commanders are like first or second on the list. And I said, this is pointless. He asked me, would I rather have CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Ayuk? And I'm like, this is pointless. This is an exercise in futility because CeeDee Lamb is going to sign his long-term extension with the Dallas Cowboys next week, right? Jerry Jones has already told us what his intent was and how he was going to handle it. They weren't going to play CD in any of the preseason games, so there was no need to rush him back because he's on a rookie contract. They can rescind all of the fines that CeeDee Lamb has incurred over his time missing every single day of training camp to this point, and they're going to do that when they sign him to his long-term deal next Thursday or, Wednesday or Thursday, right? So I don't even want to talk about that. And then, Ayuk, we've already spoken our piece there. So then, you know what Mr. Pink says after that? He's like, yeah, I'd rather have, Dyami at number 2. Not like he's saying over those guys. He was just saying, yeah, I'd rather have, because he started talking about Jahan and, I don't know about this guy. And he said, I'd rather have Dyami at number 2. And I'm just thinking, that is a statement that would not have been made 2 weeks ago. Amazing how the tables have turned. And in favor of Dyami Brown, I may add. And I love it. I love to see it. I heard your joke, scratch more fortune. Look like I got on a damn Guardian cap. I'm going to bust you in your chops. Hey. I forgot to put down one thing in my notes. So I needed to put it down real quick before I forgot. So that's what I'm currently doing. And then we can continue on with practice. All right. So I said all that to say this. Diami's playing really well, and I'm so happy for him. But this is the most important thing. We've seen it in the preseason games, and we know he's capable in a regular season game. It's not like Diami's never done it in a game before. He's made big catches. 2022, I talked about that season. That's his best season to its name to this point of his career. But I told you there were some big catches. Obviously, the Tennessee game, we didn't win it, but we should have. He had the biggest plays of that game. He had a big catch against Atlanta on the opening drive that led to the touchdown, the only touchdown scored of the game for Washington in that sloppy victory over the Falcons. He had a big catch before halftime of that Eagles game on that Monday night where we upset the Eagles and ended their undefeated season. He had some big catches. Last year, he had the big catch against Seattle at the end of the game for a touchdown to allow us to tie the game up. So Diami's had some moments, man. It's not like he can't do it. I'm happy for him. It's just funny hearing some of you do a total 180 on him, which is cool. I'd rather you guys do that than it to never work out, like AGG, for instance. Eck and JD5 connected on a wheel route deep ball up the sideline. It was about 35 yards in the air. Eck ran and caught it over his shoulder and almost scored a touchdown. So you love to hear it. You know, that those are the kind of plays you hope they connect on come the start of the regular season. Byron Pringle caught a deep ball that would have been a touchdown. And I only bring this up. The only reason that this is even significant is because we know, right? We watched Byron Pringle here in Washington last year. So we know they don't know that Byron Pringle is capable of being a receiver. Now, I've contended and I've said this. Bobby Ingram was the wide receivers coach last year. So I'm pretty sure they went to Bobby Ingram and said, hey, we know Byron Pringle can handle kickoff return duties. Can he also help us as a receiver if need be? And Ingram probably told him, hell yeah, he can help. So hearing that he caught a deep ball that would have been a touchdown, I just want them to see what we already know, which is Byron Pringle can help this team on both special teams and on offense if need be, right? This is a big one here. Rookie safety Dominic Hampton is seeing work at linebacker. This is not the first time they put him at linebacker. And as a matter of fact, if you remember the pass breakup on Saturday night against the Dolphins where he got called and flagged for DPI, but it was a great play to me. It looked clean. He was at the linebacker position on that particular play. Now, they were in a condensed formation, or they were in a condensed portion of the field, rather. So he was kind of down. But you know, they like to cross-train their safeties at linebacker. I literally talked about this yesterday, right? I literally said, hey, look out for them cross-training some of these safeties over the linebacker because I think they're going to maybe trim off some fat at linebacker, right? I told you, Anthony Pittman doesn't feel like a lock to me anymore. And if you're going to trim off some fat somewhere so you can keep that sixth, possibly seventh, dare I say seventh, again, let's count them up because I think some of y'all are losing count of some of the guys that are important here, right? So let's count them out. Excuse me. Jeremy Chin, Quan Martin, Percy Butler, Defoe, Jeremy Reeves, Dominique Hampton, Tyler Owens. That is 7 safeties, folks. All right. And I know a lot of y'all are like, well, Dominique Hampton is that and the third. They drafted Dominique Hampton in the 5th round. They do not want to cut him. Period. So understand that even if 6 is possible, there may have to be a 7th safety kept. If you're going to do that, then you have to trim off fat somewhere where it makes sense and it's compatible on the roster. That the position that most resembles safety, or the position that most resembles linebacker in this defensive scheme and setup, is safety. So if you're going to have an overload of safeties that you're keeping, the position that you trim off fat at directly correlating to safety is linebacker, because they're interchangeable and they kind of do the same things, except linebackers are much bigger, safeties have more range and are supposed to be faster. That's not always the case when you look at our linebackers and how some of our backers can run, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is you get the picture. If they're going to keep 6 or possibly 7 safeties, then they're going to have to trim off fat at linebacker. I had 6. Now with the injury to Jordan McGee, that's 5. It's already chopped down to 5. He's not going to be on the opening day roster. Anthony Pittman is as good as gone in my mind's eye. You can replace him with one of the safeties, what he does on special teams. But chop him off, right? Now you're down to 4. The 3 guys that aren't going to play on Sunday night and Michael Walker. And to me, keep those 4, and then you can start inserting, because you're going to have to keep a roster spot on ice, so to speak, for Jordan McGee. So when he's healthy, that's when you trim off one of those safeties, right? Probably Tyler Owens would be my guess. Or I just don't think you're going to be able to sneak Dominique Hampton through waivers, even if you wait till end the season to do it. Somebody's going to be, this is what GMs get paid to do, right? They're not going to be sleep on the job because you're in week number 6 of this NFL season, and they're just not going to see Dominique Hampton was cut by the Washington Commanders. They see the waiver wire. They see the transaction wire of every team in the NFL. They understand what's going on. All you had to do was have a 5th or 6th round grade on him, and your safety position looks a little shoddy, and boom, he's gone, right? This was a draftable kid, which is why they took him in the 5th round. Make no mistake about it. You cut him, you might not, you're probably going to get him back. Owens, on the other hand, nobody else is checking for Tyler Owens, which is why I keep saying, while he's been very impressive, you can cut him and get him back, and sometimes it's more about what you can get away with than what is actually the right thing to do based off of performance during, training camp and in the offseason and so forth and so forth. So I just wanted to make mention of that. So the 2 starting tackles, obviously Lucas and Wiley for practice today. Those were the first team tackles. The second team tackles, left to right respectively, were Scott and Paul. So I've already said this. I'm sticking to this. DQ did mention Trent Scott in particular. He also mentioned Chris Paul when talking about versatility. We'll talk about that. I'm standing on business. I made mention of this yesterday for the first time. I think I alluded to it on Monday night, but I definitely dug in my heels yesterday, in particular when talking about Trent Scott. I truly believe that Brandon Coleman's health, his roster spot is directly tied to Brandon Coleman's health. If Brandon Coleman is healthy, Trenton Scott is not making this roster. You're not keeping 5 tackles unless, and this is why the versatility is so important, they can cut a guy that only plays guard or plays primarily guard but can play center, but they have other guys that they feel confident can do that. I.e. Nick Allegretti. He can also play center, right? We know that Michael Dieter is primarily a center, right? And let's say you keep a Ricky Stromberg or even a Julian Good-Jones. Both of those guys can play center. Stromberg probably more so than Julian Good-Jones. So do you really need to keep Julian Good-Jones and Ricky Stromberg? The answer is, to me, is no. If you feel good about one of them a little bit more at one position or the other, and maybe they grade out a little bit higher, maybe you just go with that guy. But in my mind's eye, they need less of center, right? More of guard. And because you theoretically have 3 centers on the roster by keeping Ricky Stromberg, Michael Dieter, and you have 4, excuse me. You have 4 centers on the roster by keeping Ricky Stromberg, right? You only really need 3, and you already have 3. All you have to do is keep Michael Dieter, which they are. And then you got 2 on the offensive line that's starting that are centers in Allegretti and Biotis. So you got 3 guys that can theoretically play center. So you don't need to keep a 4th is what I'm saying. If Ricky Stromberg can't give you competent play at guard, then you don't need him, right? You go with the guy that grades out the highest at guard, and clearly they like Julian Good-Jones more than they like Ricky Stromberg, which is why Julian Good-Jones is always on the field when the second team. Again, sometimes I put too much stock into when guys are on the field, but I really, truly believe that is a sign of how the coaches feel. Like if I'm going to put Marcus Mariota on the field or I'm going to put Jeff Driscoll on the field, I'm going to try to protect him with the best 5 I can put in front of him without compromising my starters. I'm not going to just put him out there with guys that I don't believe in, right? You can try some things. I'll try some shit when Sam Hartman's out there. Hey, let's see if Mason Brooks can play, left tackle, right? Let's try some shit. You'll try some shit with Sam Hartman out there. But hell, to a lesser degree, even Jeff Driscoll, right? But at the end of the day, Scott still feels like a guy that is depending on someone else to make this team, right? He seems at this point somewhat of a liability and could be cut. So this one's going to make a lot of you guys smile out there. Tyler Owens got work with the ones today. Now, simmer down now. It was a mixture of 1s and 2s. Like they were playing that game where they were subbing in guys and getting, but some of the ones were on the field and he was out there. Just the fact that we're talking about an undrafted guy moving all the way up the food chain to the point where he's getting first, no worse than second team, but he's also now dipping his toe into the first team reps. It kind of feels like the momentum that's growing for Tyler Owens has reached its crescendo. And if he plays well enough one more time on Sunday night, he could play. Like if he plays well enough on a national stage, he could play his way onto the roster for fearing that if you cut him, you lose him, right? If he's in obscurity on Sunday night, you might be able to cut him. Like he is literally playing for an opportunity to be on this roster because if he doesn't play well, it's easy to cut him. Nobody will be checking for Tyler Owens. He plays his ass off, makes 2 special teams tackles, a couple of tackles on the field, and God forbid he forces a turnover because he's been doing that in training camp. You probably can't cut him at that point. He's literally played his way onto the roster. Cleveland Farrell and Dante Fowler Jr. were non-participants in practice. So let's talk about injuries. That's why I wrote this down. I don't know if I feel like I'm overreacting. I feel like I'm being a bit dramatic and I need to calm down. I just need somebody to be like, yo, chill, bro. Or maybe I'm not. I feel like I am. So yesterday I said, I don't know, maybe Johnny Newton just might not be healthy in his rookie season. Like this might be like how when Curtis Samuel came here his first year and he just couldn't get right? Like it could be one of those years and I had to wrap my brain around that. Like maybe this might be one of those types. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're just being super precautious with this guy because it's August, right? Same thing could be said for these two, but keep in mind, I'm very leery of guys who don't play in preseason games. It's one thing not to practice. If you don't play in the game itself, it means something's actually wrong. It may not be serious, but it's something wrong enough for you not to play, right? Because Dorrance Armstrong's out there, right? Like Cleveland Farrell should be out there. And I thought Dante Fowler, I said, okay, maybe he's just a veteran guy. He's the probably oldest defender, technically on the defense, not named Bobby Wagner. I'm like, he's probably the oldest defender. So, maybe they just felt like he doesn't need they know what he is. He doesn't need to work. He doesn't need those extra bumps and bruises in the preseason. But he hasn't played in any preseason games. Now he's not in practice, and neither is Cleveland Farrell. And remember, I asked you guys, I said, we need to find out. It's like, does anybody know what's going on? Because we need to find out if there's an injury there or if they're just holding those guys out of these games because they don't need the Cleveland Farrell's young. There's no holding Cleveland Farrell out of a preseason game. You know, now they're not practicing. Again, nobody asked about either one of these dudes. Should I be concerned or am I tripping? It's August. These guys are fine. Because if they don't ask Dan Quinn, he's not going to volunteer that information. Like they had to ask Dan Quinn 3 days in a row about Brandon Coleman before we found out he had a pec strain. Right? Like not you know, and I'm not shitting on DQ, but we didn't know what was wrong with, and they don't have to divulge this information this time of the year. You keep that in mind. We had to wait to find out what was wrong with Jordan McGee. And then when we found out from DQ, it sounds like he gave us some misinformation, because I'm out here talking about MCL injury because that's what DQ told us. And then we're hearing it's a meniscus injury. And then he had to have his meniscus shaved, which is what a lot of you were telling me. So again, should I be concerned about these injuries or no? Are we fine? Maybe I'm tripping. They're not practicing now. Like, neither one of them played in the game, and then you have all these days off, essentially, and you're not practicing on Wednesday? Maybe I'm tripping. I feel like I'm tripping. Quick kicker update. Riley Patterson, 5 of 6 in practice today, including a 58-yard bomb that he was able to connect on. Now, he did miss from 54. That was his lone miss of the day. But they want this kid to be the kicker. Like, they're going to give him if he crushes it in the New England game, he's the kicker for week 1. If he chokes, if he has another 2 for 4 or 1 for 3, he's probably good. They're probably going to look for somebody else, because the cut downs will be in 3 days or 2 days later. They'll probably be looking for someone else. They want him to be the kicker. I just don't trust him. So that was practice today. Let's get to DQ's presser. DQ talked about, he started off his press conference, interestingly enough, by talking about the work week and the themes that each day contains. So he's like, there'll be some of the things that we do that may change on a week-to-week basis based on opponent, but the philosophy and the principles of what each day stands for won't change, right? Now, within that week, you may be working on these specific things because this is the opponent that you'll be seeing, but the theme of the day won't change, right? So it doesn't matter that you played Tampa Bay in week 1. It's going to be Tell the Truth Monday to talk about what happened in that game against Tampa Bay, right? Doesn't matter that the next week you got the Giants at home in your home opener. It's going to be Competition Wednesday, right? Best against best. The first team isn't going up against the scout team, right? You're going up against the starting defense. Not for every rep, but you know, you're going to see more of that than you normally would. Turnover Thursdays. We've heard that one before, haven't we? We've heard that one before. Turnover Thursdays, right? In this group's defense, most teams probably call Thursdays Turnover Thursdays. Like, that's a commonly used phrase around the league. So not going to beat them up for that one. It was easy. It was a layup, and they just put it in the hoop. He said Fridays are called finishing Fridays. So that's more so working on the finishing touches of that week's game plan and how you're going to attack the opposing team. You're working on in-game strategy, you know, game management and end-of-game situations, those type of things. So more specialty items, you know, red zone, that sort of thing. You're tying up all loose ends on Friday and really preparing yourself mentally to get ready to try to go win a ball game. So he talked about the theme of each day, essentially, of practice So that was pretty interesting to hear about. He then was asked about Tyler Owens. He talked about, the young man really making an impact for himself, making a name. He'd love to see the energy from the teammates embracing him when he made plays in the game, which he sees as a sign of respect from the teammates. So he talked about the growth that they've seen from him, and the strides that he's made. He was extremely raw, and he still is when he got here. But he's DQ's like, he's really going for it. He said, I was proud of how he emptied the tank against the Dolphins. And you can honestly say he did. On that run where Revo comes up flying and misses, and that running back is off to the races, if Tyler Owens doesn't hawk him down, it's a touchdown. They ended up kicking a field goal on that possession. Like, it's the little things, right, that help you win football games. So he said he's been very impressed with Tyler Owens to this point. He elaborated on Johnny Newton's soft tissue foot injury. So he said this is the first time that we found out that the soft tissue injury was actually located on the foot, which makes me even more paranoid about Johnny Newton, right? We heard soft tissue. I heard soft tissue. I assumed, a calf, a hamstring, a quad, something like that. No, it's his foot. And it has nothing to do with the surgical procedure, right, that he had done. Just a soft tissue injury. Sounds like plantar fasciitis or something. That's not good. So we'll see. Again, I don't know that if that's what it is. I'm just making up stuff. I'm just throwing darts at the dartboard. We just know it's a foot injury, and they're going to take it slow with him. We'll talk more about him here in a second. He talked about Andre Jones and KJ Henry. He literally gave us the, oh man, your baby's outfit is cute speech for those two. Like, yeah, they're giving out maximum effort. They're doing things the way we want them to do it. Translation, I can't give you like a trait that stands out for any one of these dudes because they Jags. That's essentially what I got from that whole 27 seconds of him answering this question about these two dudes. He talked in circles, which is not a good sign because that means I really don't have anything. I mean, what has either one of these dudes done other than KJ Henry against the Jets, staying at home on a read option keep by the quarterback and tackling him for a loss of 1 or 2 yards? Anybody can do that. On O-line versatility, he talked about Trent Scott and Chris Paul in particular, but he said versatility on the offensive line is huge. We know this. He's talked about this before. So I was intrigued that he brought up Trent Scott because he talked about his ability to play both left and right tackle, and now they kicked him inside the guard, and they wanted to see how he did there. Then he talked about Chris Paul. Chris Paul can play both guard spots, and now they got him at right tackle. So, it's interesting to hear him talk about Trent Scott because to me, it depends on how well he plays guard, because they won't need him at tackle before they need him at guard, if that makes any sense. Like, they'd have to go through, unless it's at left tackle. The injury is that, and they have multiple injuries at left tackle. They'll need him at guard before they need him at tackle. So, does he have enough chops inside to keep a guy off the roster that is naturally a guard? Is the gap close enough? So, one of the media members brought up Dan Quinn's lack of patience. Remember, he had talked about he's not a patient man. He's not looking to come in here and have to wait 3 years to, turn this thing around. They're trying to win now, right? Like, I get it. Theoretically, it makes sense, but we know better. Like, what he doesn't want to come in here and do is beg for 3 or 4 years like Ron did right off the bat. Hey, gonna need 3 or 4 years in the military, it takes 4 years to change a culture, right? He's not coming in here begging for time. He's like, nah, I get it. The last dude won't shit. The last owner won't shit. Y'all been getting beat up on for over 2 decades. We get it. We're going to come in here and try to turn it around immediately. So he's not looking to exercise patience. He's trying to turn this thing into a winner as soon as possible. And that doesn't necessarily jive with starting a rookie quarterback, right? Those two things don't necessarily connect and go together. If you're trying to win now, your best bet isn't a rookie, number 2 overall pick. But that's short-term thinking. That's short-term view. If you're trying to win in the long term, you need that number 2 overall pick to develop. You'd like him to develop faster than not. But whatever happens, you're investing in the future being bright for a very long time, like opening up the window and keeping it open for as long as you can if you hit on this quarterback. So he talked about the balance between the two because he understands like they're going to be growing pains. It's not going to be this easy, straight up linear, path to success when you got a young quarterback. There's going to be bumps in the road. And, it's our job to try to minimize those, he said. So, we'll see what happens. But make no mistake about it. He's trying to win now. He talked about Bobby Wagner, and he got like really in depth as to what makes Bobby Wagner one of the better linebackers that he's ever, in the league, but the best linebacker he's ever coached. And he talked about, meeting, Bobby for the first time. He said, I had 2 stints in Seattle. My second stint in Seattle is when they drafted him in between my stints. So his rookie year, Quinn wasn't there. Quinn was rehired in Seattle as the defensive coordinator. Remember, the first time he was there, he's like the D-lines coach, assistant D-lines coach. Went to Florida as a defensive coordinator, came back to Seattle as their defensive coordinator, and that's when he first coached Bobby Wagner. I think it was his second year of his career. And he's just like, the dude is a phenomenal tackler. Like, he does a great job of keeping his body square. And he's like, he likened him to a, dynamic 3-point shooter in the NBA or a like professional hitter in Major League Baseball, a guy that just doesn't strike out, always finds green grass. And he said, it's just, beautiful to watch. Like, we got teaching tapes on his tackling form because he just doesn't miss, that's refreshing to hear because we weren't a very good tackling team last season. And so he, really talked about what that can do for a defense and what Bobby has, morphed into over the years. So this was an interesting quote from DQ. He said, down the stretch, he's looking for consistency for those bubble guys fighting for roster spots. And he said, a lot of times guys push, hard, right? They start to squeeze hard and it becomes counterproductive. The harder you squeeze, the more you mess up, the more tentative you are. It just doesn't bode well for you being successful. So he talked about these guys just being consistent. Like, don't try to do more than what you've already been doing. If you were already putting in good work, just continue to put in that work. Stack good days on top of good days, good plays on top of good plays, and eventually it's going to win out. But if you are the guy that's making a splash play here, splash play there, and now you feel the pressure of, hey, I need to make some more plays. Now you go out here, you're doing too much, and you make a mistake, right? So he's like, just give me the guys that are consistent. Just be consistent. Be you, right? He talked about having tough decisions to make at both safety and tight end. So he was asked, like, what are going to be the two of the most problematic positions to trim down? And he talked about safety and tight end being 2 of the more positions he's been pleased with throughout this process, and having, guys that are really talented at those 2 positions. And it made me think, not so much safety, because a lot of you, brought to my attention, or at least 1 or 2 of you did, that last year in Dallas, Dan Quinn kept 6 safeties. So it's not unprecedented for him to go over and beyond at the safety position, especially when you don't necessarily have a ton of linebackers, right? The depth just isn't there at linebacker necessarily. So you know, Quinn loves to have the undersized safety. We've got plenty of those guys that fit that kind of you know, physical profile, whether it's, you know, Dominic Hampton or Tyler Owens, right? That fit that profile of a guy that could double as a safety and a linebacker, undersized backer. So tight end is the one that really piqued my interest when he said tight end, because I'm like, the assumption that I had this entire time is, oh, he's keeping 4, so it really doesn't matter. The only guy that you're really truly cutting is Colson Yankoff. Yeah, you like him, but it's not a tough decision. But then I said, what if they're only keeping 3? Like if you're really entertaining keeping 7 safeties, again, you have to trim off fat somewhere. Special teams guys, if you're keeping 4 special tight ends, like that 4th tight end better be a core special teamer, or else what purpose? There won't be many times that you're putting 4 tight ends on the field at one time. There won't be very many. You know, goal line is the only time that you may see, you know, a chance to see 4 tight ends. And even that is very unlikely, right? You're probably going to have 3 tight ends on the field in goal line, but you could have a 4th. 4 tight ends always happens in goal line, but you could just put another offensive lineman on the field if you don't have a 4th tight end, and that's the only reason that 4th tight end is there. If you got 7 safeties, every responsibility that a tight end was going to handle on special teams, that safety can handle, right? So the only thing you really need that 4th tight end for is if something goes awry with one of the tight ends and you need a 3rd tight end for the 3 tight end set. But if everything's all good with Ertz and Sennett and Bates, Cole Turner is expendable, right? And it just kind of dawned on me today when he said, you know, I got some tough decisions at tight end. I'm like, no, if you're keeping 4, there's no tough decision. But what if he's only keeping 3? I drew a line in the sand with 5 safeties. I was like, I can't, like I had this like ancient, you know, old man get off my lawn mindset of safety. You can't have more than 5 safeties. And then somebody was like, he kept 6 in Dallas last year. And then somebody else was like, yeah, he kept 6 in Dallas last year. I was like, oh, really? And it's like a light bulb went off in my head, like, it just finally turned on, and I was like, oh, you can go past 5. Like, you can count to 6, maybe even 7 at safety. If you're going to do that, trim off fat at linebacker. Maybe they trim off some more fat at tight end. Just a thought. He brought it up. Feel like we keep him 4, but you never know. I haven't been overly impressed with Cole Turner. He has gotten more physical. I will give him that, but he hasn't really caught it well. Not that he's had a ton of opportunities. But Dan Quinn was asked, do you feel that it's crunch time now that you're 3 weeks away from week 1? And his response was, it's tricky, because he said he loves this final week of the preseason. He said it's tricky, but he loves it because on one hand, it's the last preseason game. It's the last time your roster is going to be at 90. You're going to have to make some tough decisions and, you know, all of that good jazz. But he's like, it also is essentially the start of getting ready. After this game, you cut the roster down, and now your focus completely shifts to Tampa Bay in week 1. And you become fixated with that. And then he's like, not only are you trimming the roster down to 53, but you still got to put the other, you know, 16 guys on the practice squad. So you really, it's not trimming it down to 53, it's trimming it down to 70, essentially. You know, that's the number he throws out there. So it's like, yeah, it sucks because you got to cut guys, but it's also a chance for these guys to go after it, right? And show what they can do. And then it's also an opportunity to turn your attention to the thing you've been working towards this entire offseason, which is the start of the regular season, right? So DQ had a Joe Witt Jr. conversation, and I think it was a necessary one. Because Joe Witt Jr. obviously is his guy from Dallas, and you know, Joe Witt strikes me as an Eric Bieniemy type in the sense that they keep asking him about calling plays, and they're insinuating that this is his first time. And remember, Eric Bieniemy used to get pissed off when people would ask him, how he feels about calling plays, and he's like, "Yo, I called plays before, right?" And this is 2 times that Joe Witt Jr. when they ask him, how does it feel to do this, and he's like, I have called plays before, like, so let's just get that straight. This is not my first time, like. I think people are just like wondering like how he's gonna handle this and that. And DQ's like, yo, he's one of the most prepared dudes I've ever been around. And I've heard that from not only Joe Witt Jr. because he's the son of a coach, but I've heard that from Dallas players too. Like, yo, this dude is over prepared. He like, I remember, something that was interesting last year when their cornerback was getting all those interceptions, and a lot of them were pick sixes, right? And everybody's all running down the sidelines and excited, high-fiving, and he would be like, yo, who's on special teams? Like, who we got lining up? He's on to the next play because somebody's got to be in that mindset. Everybody's jumping around, jovial, excited, pick six, yada, yada. We don't want a, 5-yard penalty on this extra point. Like, who's out here on teams? Who was on the field that can't go because they're exhausted? They just ran 82 yards down the field. Who is supposed to be on special teams? Was Deron Bland supposed to be on special teams? Okay, well, let's get somebody else ready to go in for him, right? Like, he's like, Joe Witt is so prepared, and he's like, he did a great job this entire offseason of mixing and matching the players and putting them in uncomfortable situations, seeing what guys can and can't do, figuring out if guys can play multiple positions or not, seeing if guys can play man-to-man coverage or not, seeing if guys can stand up at the point of attack, with a tackle as an undersized this or that. He said he put guys in a number of positions and predicaments, and it really gives you a lot of data. And he said he's one of the best guys that he's seen at collecting data and then using that data to help put his players in the best positions possible. So I thought that was an interesting answer, talking about Joe Witt Jr. and his superpowers and what he's really able to do. He's talked about him being a great teacher, right? He said, you can have someone that's a great lecturer, but you're not sure if there's learning taking place. He's like, not only is this guy a great communicator, but he's a great teacher, and you can tell because there's retention and then there's the action that takes place on the field. So hopefully that comes to fruition with this group. And you know how I feel about the defense already as is. So I'm not going to be shocked if this defense is the backbone of this team and gives us a chance to, make some noise this season. These last two that we're going to talk about were really interesting. Differentiators between specials and skills, right? So he talked about, so it's levels to this shit is essentially what DQ said. He talked about, there's a great question by Ben Standing. These last two conversations that we're going to talk about were really Ben Standing type questions, or not type. He asked these questions. So DQ talked about guys that are primaries. And I literally had this conversation with y'all yesterday because I started talking about Jeremy Reeves. And I said, man, I started to get a little nervous about All-Pro Revo, but then this is what I thought about. And I said, okay, this is what made it all make sense for me. And I was able to take a step back and say, bro, you tripping. There's no, Jeremy Reeves conversation. And after I say what I'm about to say, you'll know that there's no Jeremy Reeves conversation to be had. So I literally said yesterday that I was getting nervous, watching that Dolphins game, seeing Reeves miss more tackles. He had missed a couple tackles, one in particular against the Jets, missed another two that led to, one led to big play in particular. And, there seems to be this, somewhat of a liability, asset to what he's doing, and, or a liability, aspect, to what he's doing. And now, meanwhile, Tyler Owens can provide us with the same thing on special teams if he continues playing the way that he's playing. and he's making tackles on defense, right? But it's not as simple as that. I said, defensively, what are we asking Jeremy Reeves to do? Like, we're not asking him to do anything on defense. We got 96 safeties that should be playing before Jeremy Reeves even has to even be remotely close to seeing the field, right? So what are we really even talking about? If we're talking about Jeremy Reeves at free safety missing tackles, if that's the reason he's not making the roster, then what are we really talking about? It's like talking about Del Curry. And this was my analogy. Like, you're talking about Del Curry and you're upset because Del Curry isn't initiating the offense. He's not bringing up the ball without getting, pestered, and we can't get into our offensive sets because we only got 8 seconds left because he had such trouble bringing the ball up the court and he's getting cooked on the defensive end of the court. You're like, whoa. We didn't bring Del Curry into the game for any of that. We brought him in to shoot threes. That's it. What are we talking about here? Why is he even dribbling the basketball? He should be coming off of a pin down and then a stagger, and he should be shooting a three. What are we doing right now? And so I had to recalibrate my thought process to say, if Anthony Pittman's a core special teamer, if Jeremy Reeves is a dynamic. So those guys, I shouldn't be worried about Anthony Pittman missing tackles at linebacker. I think his is a little bit different because he's not Jeremy Reeves. And with the injury to Jordan McGee, I might need you to play. If I keep you here, you might have to play at some point. Whereas Jeremy Reeves got 19 safeties in front of him. He should never have to play. A little bit different, but he talked about the difference between guys that are like core elite special teamers, four teams guys, they call them. They play on every single special teams, and they really can't help you defensively or offensively. But you don't care because they're that dynamic on special teams. Then he talked about the I forgot what he called them, but we'll say the tweener guys, right? This level is this guy can help you a little on special teams, and this guy can help you a little bit on as a skill player on offense or defense. So there's value in that. And then there's the guy that really helps you as an offensive or defensive player, but doesn't give you as much on special teams. So clearly they value the guy that gives them a little bit more on specials than the guy that gives them a little bit more as a pass offensive or defensive player. So again, for a guy like Michael Wiley, that's a bad setup for you. If that's the food chain, that's a bad setup for you because you're all the way at the bottom as a guy that offers more value as an actual running back than a special teams player, whereas McNichols offers more value as a special teams player, not so much as an offensive player, but they're more concerned with, can you help me on special teams? I need that. So he said the levels essentially were Jeremy Reeves, right, where you just got an elite player that's dynamic on special teams. And I said, oh, shit. Did you just name a category after him? Oh, yeah, he making the team. There was never any doubt. Okay, for me, it was a fleeting thought. Not even 20 seconds, right? Not even. But he's making the team. He named a category after this man. It's Jeremy Reeves. Then there's the tweeners. And then, they're the guys that shine on, as a skill player more so than a special teams player. Damn. Jeremy Reeves is on this roster. Period. End of discussion. Right. Then he talked about rookies on special teams. I thought that was a great point that he brought up, because he talked about how special teams can be lagging behind for young guys in particular, because he said, think about it this way. When you draft a player coming out of college, more likely than not to make it to the NFL, you were the best or one of the best players on your team. Translation, you weren't playing very much special teams. We don't put our best guys on kickoff coverage unit, right? We don't want him going down and having to make a tackle, and this guy's catching the ball 89 times for over 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. You got other things that we need you to do. You're not running down there as a gunner trying to down the ball at the 2-yard line or cave somebody's chest in for not fair catching the football. We need you out here ready to go on these next set of downs, right? So he's like, you get a lot of these dudes. It doesn't matter what round they're drafted or even if they're undrafted. A lot of these guys didn't play special teams, especially offensive guys. So you have to literally teach them some of the fundamentals, like how to tackle, like get your head out of there, that sort of stuff. And then you literally got to teach them the rules of special teams and how to be a good special teams player. Like you got to teach them the fundamentals and the technical side of it. And, you know, they're going to come along a lot slower than a guy that's been in the league 5-6 years, like an Anthony Pittman, for instance, who has adapted and adjusted to the special teams in the NFL and knows this is how I'm going to eat. If I'm going to stay in the league, this is what I got to do, right? Versus the young guy that just came out of college and he's never played special teams in his life, right? Or hasn't played it in a while, you know, bare minimum. So, you know, he talked about really having to work with the young guys because of that and having to take that into consideration when you start talking about where a guy is now versus where that guy's going to be. And is it worth it to, you know, cut him and continue to work with him on the practice squad, or do you keep him on the active roster? And I think that's also how far did the guy come and how much can he accelerate the process? If he could do that during the course of the regular season, we don't need to cut him. Right. And we see where he is and what we think he can be. So I think there's a lot to that as well. And he said when they sign players, when they bring guys in, they have a vision for every single player that they bring in here. You know, he said they may not have, you know, the vision or they may not see themselves on special teams, you know, when they get drafted, but we do. We see him and we say, hey, that guy is a long-armed wing that we can put out there on special teams, right? And that guy may not be thinking about it. He might be thinking, man, I'm about to get this work on outside linebacker, right? I'm about to come in here and make an impact. And they're like, yeah, on special teams, you know? So I thought that was interesting too from DQ. All right, so that essentially was today's practice. They're wearing the black unis. We talked about that already. That's one of the more interesting things that came from practice today. I don't think they're going to, you know, be very many starters out there when practice takes place. Brandon Coleman did participate in individual drills today, but same with Sam Hartman and, you know, a couple other guys, but no teamwork for Brandon Coleman. But there's still a chance that they get later in the week. He's ready to go in team drills and then ultimately can play on Sunday. I'm still not holding my breath. And Dan Quinn's statement of, hey, we would like him to play. We want him to play, but we don't need him to play for him to be starting week 1 versus Tampa leads me to believe that he won't be starting week 3 of the preseason versus the New England Patriots. So tomorrow I'm going to start a little series where we look at all of the positions. I'm going to be knocking down 2 positions at a time. I'm going to start with the more challenging positions first, and then we'll work our way to the more short things towards the end of that breakdown. But be on the lookout for that at some point tomorrow as we work our way through the weekend and ultimately find ourselves at the 53-man roster cut down on Tuesday. So we'll be all over it. We'll be, you know, kind of keeping tabs on everything. And I think there's some real conversations to be had. I think we had some of them tonight, like linebacker versus safety. And I'm even entering in tight end into that conversation too, right? So, you know, we'll see. But anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post, or in this particular case, Training Camp Confidential with the Washington Commanders. Post up. Take command. Look forward to chopping it up with you guys again tomorrow as there is practice again tomorrow. Turnover Thursdays. Ball is life. We'll see if we're still among the living tomorrow. Meanwhile, we got preseason football and I got a podcast episode. So anyway, I digress. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. God bless. Good night.